Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy us a podcast.
Mary had a little the fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
Radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream.
Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand.
Saying. Every time I hear that, I get chills and I just well up. Because I know he knew he was going to be killed. I just know, that's why he says I may not get there with you now. So what was he doing there and where was he? Dr. Martin Luther King was in Memphis. And why was he in Memphis that day? Because on February 1st, 1968, there was a wiener barrel, which was an old garbage sanitation truck, a garbage truck in Memphis. And these two guys were in the garbage bin trying to stay out of the rain, riding along in this garbage truck. Their names were Ethel Cole and Robert Walker. And they were just trying to stay out of the rain. And because they were in the garbage bin, they were covered, but then you had a packing ram, that thing that comes down and crushes the garbage. It came down and crushed them because the city of Memphis, under this segregationist mayor named Henry Loeb, was practicing fiscal austerity. A lot of this is going to sound very familiar and current to you, although it's 1968 we are talking about here. And he had continued to use these outdated pieces of equipment in the Public Works Department, even though this garbage truck should have been junked. Now, why did he do that? Because the 1,300 sanitation workers were African Americans. And he didn't give a rat's ass about their safety. And he paid the minimum wage of $1.60 per hour. But they had to work until the route was done, and sometimes they would put in 60 hours a week. There was no overtime, so they got paid for 40, even though they were working 60. And some of these people in Memphis, most of the sanitation workers in Memphis at that time, were so poor that they would draw welfare while they worked these 60-hour work weeks. They had no showers, they had no sanitary facilities, they had no access to upward mobility, meaning supervisory jobs. They had no rights on the job. Then they got zero respect. And when Cole and Walker were crushed by this faulty garbage truck, they were only in their 30s, and they had left their wives and children behind with no source of income. So the head of the union down there, T.O. Jones, tried to organize the workers in the union to change the conditions. But the mayor, the segregationist Mayor Loeb, refused to even talk to them. He wouldn't bargain with them. He wouldn't even deduct the union dues from their paychecks so that they could, support the union. And so just like today, Loeb was a pro-business Republican, and he sought to block the public employees unions and was trying secretly to destroy them in the private sector as well as the public sector. Sanitation workers were public workers. So working people who had no means to advance their interest were left without anybody to organize them. Now, this is 1968, and I just want you to know that in Memphis, in Tennessee, in the South, the industrial unions, called the Congress of Industrial Organizations, or the CIO part of the AFL-CIO, and black workers had overcome in Memphis Jim Crow laws. They got better jobs. They got some better wage classifications in the private sector through unions. But the CIO had really stopped being effective about 1955. And so the CIO was unable to collect the union dues from the public workers. And so they started this long decline, and the living standards for the public workers stagnated and declined. And so in 1968, the sanitation workers were part of the vast working poor in the South. They were doing full-time work, but they were only paid part-time wages. And the public employee union was the only means they had to resolve, their plight, because they had no political power whatsoever in 1968. And that's why Dr. King was in Memphis. Because after a couple days after the death of Ethel Cole and Robert Walker, the public works supervisors added insult to injury. They sent the sewer and drain workers home with no pay during a rainstorm, but the white supervisors stayed at work and they got full pay, but they had very little to do because, it was raining. And so they had a Sunday night meeting to air their grievances, and the sanitation workers went on strike on February 12th, which was Lincoln's birthday. The local leader of Local 1733 of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Workers, you know them as AFSCME now, didn't ask approval from the national office because they knew the national office wouldn't approve it and that they would just replace the strikers. And the mayor in Memphis responded by threatening exactly that. He said, if you walk out, we'll replace you permanently. And so during the next 6 weeks, there was a lot of unrest in Memphis. The police were attacking the workers. They were attacking their supporters. They were pulling out the clubs and the mace, and it happened more than once. And then the strike became this huge battle over whether or not you could join a union at all, and over the dignity and the self-respect that the black workers who were working 60 hours a week and taking home $1.60 for a 40-hour work week, and so the black community in the city, 40% of the population of Memphis at that time, about 500,000 people, they saw the violent response by the mayor and the police department. And so they recognized that this was, the plantation mentality of white racism, and that they had endured enough down there, and that the history of slavery and segregation and the Jim Crow laws, and so they started putting up these signs all around Memphis that said, I am a man. And everybody knew exactly what they were talking about down there, especially the black church clergy. So you had Reverend James Lawson and Henry Starks and other black ministers opening up their churches. They had nightly rallies. Maxine Smith and Samuel Kiles and others who you probably never heard of, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, they bonded together with AFSCME, and they organized mass picket lines and mass demonstrations to confront this Mayor Loeb, this segregationist, and the white women especially joined the African-American women, and they boycotted all the merchants downtown Memphis. And the Memphis Labor Council passed a resolution, and they helped the demonstrations, by giving their support. You had the United Rubber Workers Union. They opened up their halls for daily meetings. You had black students walk out of schools in a show of support for these demonstrations. You had a group called the Invaders, who were black advocates. They threatened to escalate, to incendiary tactics, to violent tactics. And this is why Martin Luther King got involved. They had marches 2 times a day. They had church rallies every night. Why am I telling you all this? Because these are the things that work. This is the kind of commitment that works. So they had twice daily marches. They had evening church rallies. They had continual picket lines. And even though the strikers themselves, the workers themselves, were all men, the women from both the black and white communities, through their churches, their community organizations, committed their time to make food. They donated clothing. They gave shelter to the striking families. And they started this consumer boycott of the downtown merchants, which destroyed business for the white merchants in downtown Memphis. It was the first true mass movement. It was the best example of when you get labor and the church and the civil rights organizations and students and housewives and stay at home and everybody all together with one single purpose. The media in Memphis completely distorted the facts, completely distorted it, because it was a white-dominated Southern media, and they refused to tell the side of the unions, and they refused to tell the side of the workers, and they refused to tell the side of the white women who were bonding with the black women and how they were supporting these striking families. And so you had a couple of civil rights leaders that went to the media, Roy Wilkins and Bayard Rustin. They came to speak to the media because they wanted national attention. They wanted to tell people outside of Memphis what was going on. But there was no national attention for this until March 18th. And that's the little snippet of the speech that Dr. Martin Luther King gave at the Charles Mason Temple. It was one of the largest indoor mass gatherings in the South during the civil rights era. And he went on to say all labor has dignity. He included Memphis in the Poor People's Campaign to take hardworking African-American men and women into the nation's capital to demand that Congress shift its war on spending to take care of jobs and housing and education and health care and other human needs of families that were, devastated by the lack of pay because they wouldn't even let them collect union dues. So if you're wondering why the unions have disappeared, thank a Republican. This was the kind of organization that was possible with unions, churches, civil rights leaders, and men and women of good faith. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.